don't really come to EMISA, but they have their own little workshop, the special interest group on systems analysis and design, and they don't not only participate there, but they're really active. And we've come together several years ago, in particular because I felt that several of them were doing really interesting novel applications of conceptual modeling. And I listed some of them here. Mohammed has been a doctoral student of mine some years ago. He's now he's been a lecturer in Australia. He now moves to Canada as well. And we all came together and wrote a paper over many years that sort of has two aims. One of them was sort of taking stock. What is it that we're doing in conceptual modeling research, and maybe what should we be doing? And I like this EMISA format of being able to pitch a paper that's already out there and trying to hope to get that message across a little bit more. So that's what I'll try to do. So I'll pitch the paper a little bit in the next couple of minutes. So why did we do this? We actually had two separate teams working on this idea. So Mohammed and I, in our work together, we looked at a lot of the research that had been done. And you know me, I have sometimes very strong views on certain things, and voice that. And then there was also the situation that Roman and Bini in particular, they were trying to reinvigorate the SIGSAND community, which isn't, frankly speaking, as active and big as EMISA. So they really had the situation where they said, well, you know, is this sort of dead? Is this dead? Is this done and dusted? Several people within it had that conversation. There were a lot of emails going back and forth in that SIGSAND space and saying, like, well, what is it? What should we do? Should we say conceptual modeling is done and dusted? It has no place anymore because everyone's doing agile. And other people said, no, we just got to do sexy things now. We just got to do sexy topics and do modeling and big data and modeling and AI and so. So I always felt that people didn't really know what place they were in and whether or not what they were researching in conceptual modeling had any value and it was timely anymore. Yeah, and here are some examples where some of these issues came up. And it so happened that while we were working on this paper, Richard Baskerville, McMyers, and Youngjin, they wrote a paper which is also a challenge in a way. They called it Digital First. If you read this paper, they basically said, look, information systems are no longer representations of the world. What? As a modeling scholar, you would go like, well, how can you say that? That's what we've been doing all this time. We've been modeling reality in some way because we want to build systems, right? And now you're telling me that we no longer need to do this because now the digital comes first and then we adjust our reality to it. Okay, so this was sort of the backdrop, if you want. And what we've done basically in the paper is we went back to a path setting paper, and you probably all know this paper, a commentary that was written about 20 years ago, that sort of introduced to a lot of people the sort of the terms that we use a lot. So methods, grammar, scripts. I know that there's a variety of these languages, but to me, we always talk about the same things. We sometimes use different words. So some people talk about grammars, others talk about notations. Some talk about methods and others talk about techniques. But in a way, we all talk about the same thing. So this paper was fairly influential in that it became not only sort of the vocabulary that a lot of people use, but it also had a research agenda with about 37 or so research questions at that time that people actually started ticking off and working on over the past 20 years. So one thing that we do in this paper is we review all this literature, all the papers, obviously not all the papers, but many papers, and had a look at which of these questions they answered and whether they got answered and whether someone answered questions that weren't listed here. Yeah, and I'm just showing one little graph. The paper has a lot of these statistics in the appendix. But I think this tells a bit of the story. So the number one thing we've done over the last 20 years, if you go by papers that are published in, some 10 journals or so that we looked at, is we evaluated different types of modeling scripts, or different types of models, to have a look which one's better. Yeah, I take ER diagrams and I take some sort of ER plus notation that I maybe invented or someone else invented, and I give it to people and I have a look at how well they understand the model. Yeah, so model understanding, model comprehension, these sorts of studies have by and large been dominated. The second largest has been that we've focused on methods, on procedures, on approaches on how to model. Yeah, That they could be in the form of a tool set, of course. They could be in the form of some sort of guidelines, in forms of a really standard or a complete procedural model for how we turn any sort of requirements and turn them into a model. And the third most frequently occurring type of research was that we had a look at the people that do modeling, typically the ones that read models, not necessarily the ones that create models, and have a look at what sort of individual difference factors come to bear. So which cognitive variables and which personality types, and whether people prefer reading models left to right and top to bottom, and whether they prefer colors or not, and these sorts of things. Yeah, so these were the most frequently occurring topics of the last 20 years. And if we, in the paper, we then challenge some of these things. We say, well, that's all nice, and I've done a lot of that work too, so of course it has value. But there's also other things that happen in reality over the last 20 years, and we don't have to talk a lot about what these are. More things, Internet of Things came up. We have social media, we have AI, we have all sorts of developments that have happened, and it sometimes feels to me that what we do in conceptual modeling is to some extent disregarding. So what we've done is we sort of try to update this old framework, how we think about conceptual modeling, and put it into a more modern version of it. So you should hopefully see that this model bears resemblance to the old one. So we still have scripts and methods and grammars in the context, but we have agents here. We have different types of reality. We call it a physical and a digital reality, and we have a few more errors, so to speak. Yeah, and what this framework represents is that we've taken several updates that we think have been very prevalent, very, very strong in the community, and not in one field, but really in how we all do research on conceptual modeling. And we sort of relaxed them. So we didn't deny them, we just relaxed some aspect of them so they continue to support whatever we've been doing, but also other things. Give you one example. The first assumption that is very evident if you read all these papers is that we assume that we develop models to represent some part of reality, a business process somewhere or an organization that exists somewhere, and then we create a model of that. Yeah. So that's fine, of course, and it continues to be fine. But there's also now a requirement for models that we don't only represent these physical or these social constructions in reality, but also whatever goes on in the digital reality. And then we have to think, if we do that, then we have to think about the relationship between these two realities. And then the key insight here is then it can't just be that one represents the other. Yeah, maybe we need to translate. Maybe we need to execute one model in the other one. Maybe we need to change one of them. Yeah. So there's now more things than models do than just represent. And if models do more than just represent, then we also need to look at other outcome variables, not just understanding, comprehension, which are measures of representation, but not, for example, of execution. Yeah. So we need some more. We say we need more dependent variables. Okay, we can't just continue by doing things and then measuring how well people understand that model that I've just given. Yeah. Another one that I'm just drawing attention to here is what we call the agency assumptions. So far, we largely work of the assumption that scripts, models are produced and or consumed by humans. And we all know that's no longer the case. And especially in the modeling community, some of us have been working a lot on algorithms that produce models or even consume models, right? In the process management space, a classical example are process execution engines that interpret models. There are also algorithms that convert text to models and models to text and all these sorts of things. So we know that, but what we haven't done is have really a good way of incorporating these and giving them properties that we can study. Yeah, we know, for example, that human agents, we know they need to have experience. We know that they have familiarity with different grammars. They have domain knowledge, these sorts of things. So we know how we can characterize humans. How can I characterize an algorithm? How do I know that one algorithm that constructs a model is better or worse than another one? Yeah. So that's another area that needs more attention. And so overall, these are four things that culminate, not only in this figure, obviously, but also with the text that comes with it. And if you follow that idea, then of course we can continue doing what we've been doing, but there's also a new set of areas that become quite interesting. So some of the more interesting things that we think is how we can move forward with modeling is, number one, it's no longer the grammar that's so important, but really the script. So it's no longer, I don't want to spend more of my attention on BPMN, but I want to have a look at how people, create certain different models or scripts, whether they're grammatical or not, I don't care. Yeah. And in the paper, we have a few examples of ungrammatical conceptual models of the world. So ungrammatical, we mean they don't have a formalized meta model. They're not a variant of ER diagrams or BPMN or Petri nets or whatever. Yeah, but they're still models. They're still conceptual models, and they try to represent certain aspects of some reality. The second one, which is I think my favorite, is that the script does more than represent. Yeah, it remains important, very important, but scripts can do some more things. And we give several examples, and the examples that we give are, for example, augmented reality. My favorite example, Pokemon Go, or Fitbits, wearable devices, or Oracle scripts in blockchain executed automated processes. So not all of that is about representation. A lot of that is about execution something or changing something. Yeah. The third one is, of course, that we need to think more about the agents, and in particular digital agents, whatever form or shape they have, and how we can differentiate and study them. And then, of course, with all of that, the context in which modeling occurs is broader, it's bigger. It's not just restricted to the work of a business analyst that captures what an organization is doing because we want to support systems development activities. It's happening within that organization, between organizations, in private life, and everything in between. And that's it, really. I thought I had 10 minutes, so I try to be very short, and I only want to pitch the paper. The paper is open access, so you can download it. We paid a lot of money to make it open access. We should put that forward as well. Open access is great, but it was almost a 5-figure sum that we need to pay. Anyway, so go and read the paper, challenge it, of course, if you want. I hope it creates some ideas. Thank you very much.